Well, welcome to the garage today. I'm David Whitlinger. This is Mongrel Motorsports YouTube channel. And if you're a regular subscriber, you know we've been working on the 66 Ford Falcon, doing a kind of a light resto mod, rolling restoration kind of thing on it. And I wanted to talk today through the general public and the general viewing audience about the collector car thing and how to get into it and what you maybe want to think about before you take that plunge. We tend to be hobbyists and often are masters of some and not of everything. And one of the things that you need to think about when you get into the car hobby and you're looking for that project car is, what are your capabilities? What are you willing to learn, and what are you willing to invest in as far as equipment and tools and so forth? So if you're going to buy a car like our Falcon here, there's essentially three different areas of restoration type work that you want to be looking at. One is interior, one is exterior, and one is mechanical. So the mechanical is your engine, transmission, drive line, brakes, all that kind of stuff. The exterior is going to be paint and body work, also chroming, but you're going to have to send that out. You're not going to do that at home. And the interior, you're going to be talking about seat upholstery, carpet, and headliners. So I've done most all of it, not so much the interior stuff. In fact, the seats for this car at an upholstery shop now. But the exterior body work and that kind of thing I've done, and I've done lots of mechanical work on all kinds of vehicles. And this car, today I'm working on welding in some repair panels in the floor. Not very big, but it's still welding in patch panels. And I have to make them myself and so on. I don't enjoy it. So I wanted to talk about this today because I think some people get into this hobby and don't really realize that you may have to do different things that you hadn't anticipated on and different things that you probably don't enjoy. Now, this is a hobby, and the point of the hobby for me is to enjoy myself working in the garage. I like doing that. It's a very rewarding thing to do because you get instant gratification. When you work on something and you complete it, or you get it partway done even, you can see that you've made progress. That's the nice thing about it. Whereas where I work for my day job, I'm doing stuff on the computer, and really I don't have anything to show for it at the end of the day other than high stress. So this is much better. But I wouldn't want to do this for a living because that would suck all the fun out of it. And a wise man once told me when I was very young, he asked me, I was at a restoration shop hanging around, and he said, "You really like cars, don't you?" I said, "Yes, I do." He says, "Don't work on them for a living. You'll learn to hate them." So I took that advice, probably the only piece of advice I've ever taken from an adult, and chose not to go into hands-on work. And I'm kind of glad I did, although it is a very lucrative career right now if you're looking to get into a good money-making position as a auto body tech or a mechanical tech. You can do very well. But I enjoy working on these, especially the older things, because they're simple, they're easy to access things, and if you pick right, parts availability is usually not a problem. So when you buy that project car, you go shopping for that project car, keep that in mind. What are your skill sets? What interests you? Do you really think you're going to like doing body repair? Because body repair is more of an artistic skill, whereas working on an engine and transmission is a tactile mechanical skill. I'm very good at tactile mechanical skill. I am okay at artistic body work kind of things. I have about a 50% success rate in doing body work. What I mean by that is if I do body work to a panel, half the time I get it right, and when I put paint on it, it looks fabulous. The other half of the time I do it, I can spend hours and hours and hours doing it, and it'll look like ass when I'm done. And that's just the way it is with me, and I know what to do, I know how to do it, but I don't have that level of attention to detail, I guess, that it requires to really do a good job. And it's very time consuming. I'm welding in these patch panels today, and I'm a little appalled at how long it's taking to do this. And I'm not really slacking off or struggling with it. It just takes a lot of time to cut things out, make them fit, do your welds, grind your welds down, go back and do the welds where you missed, and so on. And then you're drilling out spot welds and getting your new pieces ready to put in and drilling holes in those. And it's very time consuming, and I'm going to spend 2 days doing this on this one side of the floor, and I'll get it done, but it's 2 days that I could have been doing something more fun, to be honest. So by more fun, I mean putting on the new door weather strip that I got. Unfortunately, I didn't have the glue to adhere it, so that's another story. But all these other little things that I have, I have a rear main seal to replace, I have, instrument panel to put back together, all that kind of stuff. It's very easy for me to do. It's all screws and bolts and so on. Bodywork is much, much more involved, takes a lot longer, and it's a much bigger piece of the elephant when you start looking at a car. So, okay, so you can't do that, or you don't want to do that, fine. You're going to send it out and have somebody else do it. Not so fast. Finding anybody to repaint a car, even a new car today, is very difficult. And it's not cheap. Now, granted, you can go get a quote from your local Mako for $1,200 for a base clear respray on a car, but they're not going to take any time prepping it and doing anything extra to it. They're just going to bring it in, tape it off, sand it, blow paint on it, bake it, give it back to you when it's done. To get a true restoration type paint job on a car, you're talking at least $6,000. That's just to paint it. If it needs body work or rust repair or panel replacement, instantly through the roof. Auto body work is very expensive, and it's almost impossible now to find anybody that wants to touch this stuff. All these body shops out there, you see them everywhere, especially the chains like Caliber and Crash Kings and all that. They're interested in doing insurance work because that's easy in, easy out. Somebody that has money's paying the bill. They don't have to worry about getting paid, that kind of thing. So if you're thinking you're just going to drop this off at your local body shop and they're going to spend 6 months working on it and give it back to you, not so much, kids. So you really need to think about that. If you can't do the paint and body work yourself, you really probably ought not buy a car that needs paint and body work. I'm just going to put that out there. It's very, very hard to find anybody willing to do it, and when you do, it's going to cost a lot of money, maybe more than your car's worth. If you're doing a 66 Falcon that restored to perfection is probably only worth 15 to 20 grand, it's not worth it. If you do it yourself, yeah, okay, maybe it is then. And if you're doing it yourself, you should be doing it for the enjoyment of doing it, right? So there's that part. The interior, most people don't really like doing interiors, I think just because it's not very car-ish. Doing seat upholstery or sewing things or just, even putting new covers on a seat. It's not necessarily difficult, but it's not exciting, it's not sexy. But there are people that enjoy it, and more power to them, and I'm glad that they're out there. Doing headliners, that can be a real nightmare. This one isn't going to get done for a while for that very reason. Carpet, easy peasy, just take the things out of the inside, lay out your new carpet, put the stuff back in. As long as it's form-fitted carpet, it's pretty easy. Mechanical stuff, that's another whole deal. That's the part I enjoy the most. I find it to be the easiest to do because it's just nuts and bolts. You don't necessarily need a lot of fancy tools or equipment to do it, depending on how deep in you're going. If you're rebuilding an engine, that's a little more involved. If you're just pulling the engine out and taking it to a machine shop or putting in a crate motor or something, not very hard at all. Transmissions, automatics, they're full of, mystical things like pixie dust and unicorn farts. So I don't really know how they work, and I have never done one. But manual gearboxes are pretty simple. They're just, gears, and as long as you keep them in the proper order, you're probably okay. Brakes, suspension, kind of big, dirty parts, heavy work, more so than, putting spark plugs in an engine. But again, not really hard. So all of that's doable by the average person with tools. If you're at least a little handy with tools, you can probably do the mechanical aspects. Some of the things get a little bit more involved. Let's say you have to put a heater core in a car. In this car, it's not too bad to do. I have a video that I covered kind of how I did that. But in some cars and more modern stuff, it can be an absolute nightmare. You have to take the entire dashboard out of the car. That gets involved, and there's a lot of things you got to remember to hook up, or you're going to be tearing it apart again to fix your problems. So, also, what age of car are you looking at? 1960s cars are probably the easiest ones to do. They're not hard to work on. Most of the parts are still being reproduced by somebody, unless you're in an oddball car like AMC's, and they're affordable if you're into 60s domestic cars. They're probably the easiest. 50s cars can be, depending on what you pick, but it's a lot harder to get sheet metal trim and glass for those. 70s are slowly picking up and they're getting there. Once you get past the mid 80s though, you're getting into fuel injection and a lot of electronics, and the newer you get, the worse it gets, which is why I don't have any interest in newer cars really. That's why I would rather work on these. Older than that, 1940s back into the pre-war cars, that's a whole different ball game. I don't know much about them. I won't be giving advice on that. I think they're easy to work on, but parts availability, unless you're talking Model A's, something that's very, very plentiful, maybe not easy to do. A lot of those cars now you can buy very inexpensively, already done in nice driver quality. An older restoration maybe that was done 20, 30 years ago by a guy who's now, you know, sadly deceased, passed on, and his family's selling the car because these guys are aging out. People that were interested in those pre-war cars, they're mostly elderly or, you know, gone already. So those cars, that market's kind of gone down. You can get those pretty handily and inexpensively, and you wouldn't have to restore one if you save up your pennies, because you're going to be spending the same amount anyway, right? Might as well buy one that's already done and enjoy it today. So what do you want from the hobby? Do you just want to drive the car? Do you just want to show the car? Or do you really like working on it? Do you like doing the build? Do you like being creative and kind of modifying things? Because that adds another thing to it too. If you're the kind of person that wants to modify the car and make it your own and do something custom, that's fine. Hopefully you have the skill set to do that. I wouldn't be going in doing an oddball engine swap on a car that I've never done an engine swap on before. I wouldn't do a lot of custom body changes and shaving things and cutting things and chopping things if you're not familiar with how to do that, because you can wind up with a real disaster. So you got to be very careful when you want to take on a project like that. And when that project is done, highly modified cars, keep in mind, you may really like it, doesn't mean everybody else in the marketplace is going to like it, and it can be very difficult to sell. So these standard cars, much easier to get around with and move on if you decide it's not for you anymore. The other thing you can look at is if you can't afford cars or you think they're too complex, you can always go the motorcycle route. Got no complaints with that. Very easy to work on. All the British bikes, very easy to get parts for the most part. Japanese, Harley is pretty easy. So there's that kind of stuff too. These are much easier, cheaper to insure, take up virtually no space in the garage, and no more expensive certainly than to work on in a car. So that's another object that you can potentially do for a hobby if you can't quite swing the car, don't have a place to work on it or whatever. Look at a motorcycle. Not necessarily a bad choice. So that's just some of the things I wanted to bring out today in this little discussion that you should think about before you buy the car. Make sure that you have the skills, and if not, the finances and the local talent pool to help get your car done. Don't buy the car sitting in the field, missing 40% of its parts, thinking that you're going to restore it as your first project. It's a very bad move. Don't do that. Try to find the nicest running, driving car that you can that just needs a little help, that needs being brought back to life a little bit. That's the best project for a beginner. I'm into this car, you know, this is probably number 12 or something as far as project cars go for me. So I've done, you know, quite a few before this. So I'm comfortable working with this car. But this car did run and drive when it came into the garage. Not well, but it did run and drive. And it doesn't need a lot of rust repair. And I, most importantly, don't intend to paint it because I don't care about paint anymore, which is a blessing. So something fell against the car the other day and put a scratch in it. How much of a relief was that for me? So if you demand shiny paint and show quality, it comes with responsibility. Just keep that in mind as well. But if you're okay with driving something around and can embrace this new era of, you know, roadkill, junkyard digs, vice grip garage type of cars, which I have, then this is a lot of fun. I mean, you can do a lot with these cars and not be all bogged down in the cosmetics, which are the most expensive part of any restoration. I hope you got something out of that. If you did or didn't, please leave a comment below and let me know. I might try to do some more of these talks in the future as we go on, but right now I've got to get back to welding. Thanks for watching.